Shalom, everybody. This is Tim, and I'm very happy to get to be here with you today. Hoping everybody is going to have a great Shabbat this week. This week we are in Parashat Mishpatim, and something really curious happens in Parashat Mishpatim. Israel had just camped at Sinai, had just been freed from slavery. Great thing had happened. And there at Sinai, God showed up and he spoke the 10 words to him. And everything there was very orderly, just like we like things. Orderly, easy to grasp, easy to understand. And the very first commandment, I am the Lord your God. And this sets the tone for everything else. And Israel had committed earlier in chapter 19, verse 8, all that Hashem says, we will do. Now, it had to be very deliberate, had to be genuine, and Israel had accepted God's marriage proposal. And specifically, Israel had chosen to be a priesthood to God and to the entire world. Now, the essence of Torah is the essence of relationship that he desires with all humanity. His heart should be our hearts. But in Parashat Mishpatim, up to this point, like I say, everything was orderly. We like everything orderly. It's easier to grasp and it's easier to understand. But in Parashat Mishpatim, suddenly we find that things seem a little bit scattered. Now, for those of you who don't attend Congregation Beth Yeshua or a Messianic synagogue anywhere, the word Mishpatim means commandments that deal with how we walk out our lives together. And very specifically, this is relationship among us. And it's when Yeshua was asked by the Pharisees, what's the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the other is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So love your neighbor as yourself. That's the mishpat, the commandment where God says, I want you to love each other and walk out your relationship together. So most of the commandments here in Parashat Mishpatim are about community and they're about relationships. And you see commandments about murder, kidnapping, theft, treatment of parents, fights, animals killing or hurting people, damage to crops, lending and borrowing, marriage. What do you do if you have a sorcerer in your community? But there are also ceremonial laws that are mixed in. So the point is, keep the Sabbath, but when the Sabbath is over, you don't remove your spiritual overcoat and go back to the rest of your life. You continue to live out these holy commandments every day of the week. So again, there are three kinds of commandments. There's the mitzvah. That's where God says, this is what I want you to do, and this is why I want you to do it. Then there's the chok, which is a commandment that God gives, and he does not explain why. I'll give you a great example. Let me think for uno momento, and if you don't speak Russian, that means for a moment. A great example of a chok, don't sow two kinds of seeds together in your field. And he does not explain why. The response is, yes, sir, we will do what you say. And then there's the mishpat. The mishpat, again, is how we walk this out together. There's a major concentration here in Parashat Mishpat. Now, this is strange because the very first commandment in this parasha is when you buy a Hebrew slave. They just got out of slavery. So it seems a little weird. But the fact is, this is not really about slavery. Okay? And this is more about an act of redemption. And it begins Exodus 21:12. Ki tiknei eved ivri. When you acquire a Hebrew slave. So what happened is they were to serve for 6 years. And in the 7th year, he's free to go. And no payment. Now, this is not slavery as we think about it. Rather, this is servitude. This is a very messianic passage. Tikne shares a root with the name Cain, where he got his name. So it doesn't point to slavery. And it also is found in Exodus chapter 15, verse 16, when they're singing at the sea after being redeemed from Egypt. It says, Imzu Tiknati, the people you have ransomed. So it all points to redemption, and a servant is redeemed by a righteous master, just as God has redeemed Israel. Well, the one who is redeemed got himself in trouble. Most of the time it was going to be something like stealing, thievery, something to that effect. And sometimes just poverty. The guy is poor and he doesn't know how to get out of his poverty. So a redeemer among the people of Israel would come along and would come to the aid of the offender. Like I say, this is very messianic. So what about the non-Jews? Could they also be redeemed? Well, it's the same word, eved, for servant, involving this redemption. Some great examples. There's Rahab, there's Ruth, there's Obed-Edom, and on and on. There are several more examples of it. And the servants from the nations are brought in. Now, they are not released in the 7th year. This becomes a lifelong commitment for them. Now, it means full acceptance. You become a part of the community. Your children after you become a part of the community. And that's the same redemption that happened when people came out of Egypt. It wasn't just the Jewish people who came out. There were many who were non-Jews who came out. The most famous one I can think of is Caleb. So they came out and they were brought out to God's mountain to be a part of God's bride, to accept his marriage proposal. And in Parashat Mishpatim, the redeemed and the betrothed also become redeemers as well. So the ministry to the nations is to bring people out of the darkness into redemption. This is the goal of the Torah. Restore the world back to its original design through Messiah Yeshua. And because of him, we're transformed and we are called to be redeemers, especially to redeem the Redeemer, to go out and tell people about the one who redeemed us so they can be redeemed as well. And it requires us to be servants of God and servants of each other. It's beautifully said in Matthew 20:26 through 28. Whoever among you wants to be a leader must become your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This exemplifies Mishpatim. This exemplifies what it is to love your neighbor as yourself and to do for your neighbor what you would have done for yourself. As a matter of fact, Yeshua even really wrenched up the meaning of it. He said, love each other as I have loved you. And he loved them enough to lay down his life. He loved us enough to lay down his life for us. And we should be willing to do the same. It's our reasonable service. And that's what Paul wrote to the Romans. So he left it to Israel to do and for the righteous Gentiles to come in and do until his kingdom comes. And what a great and glorious day that's going to be. So, shalom everybody. Have a blessed weekend.